Time for markets now, and this week I was joined by Frayne Olson, ag economist from North Dakota State University. We discussed the corn, soybean, and wheat markets, but I began the interview by getting a sense of how the COVID-19 pandemic is impacting farmers there in North Dakota.
Our impacts haven't probably been as large as what you've seen in Nebraska. We do have a relatively large livestock sector, but it's primarily cow-calf operations. We don't have the feedlot infrastructure that you do in Nebraska. So our impacts probably haven't been as great. The other thing is we have a very diversified crops agriculture, so we do deal with some specialty crops that you guys don't have to worry about. Now on the energy side, that's a completely different scenario or situation. So we've had much larger losses in our energy sector. The Bakken area, which is the shale oil production zone, has really been impacted. Crude oil prices have dropped significantly. We just recently got an announcement that the Dakota Access Pipeline was going to be shut down. There was a state court order indicating that the Corps of Engineers had not done their due diligence when it came to an environmental assessment. So we're going to be looking at some lower gas prices out of the Bakken just because we're relying on that pipeline to try and remain competitive. So from our energy sector, there's going to be some pretty large impacts. From the grain and livestock standpoint, again, livestock will likely be impacted more if we start seeing more additional shutdowns. You know, restaurant trade was starting to come back. Again, from the meat sector, that's important because we do sell and push a lot of our meat products through the restaurant trade. For drive-through business, that's a little bit different. I mean, a lot of the drive-through restaurants haven't seen the drop-off in production or drop-off in business. And again, but from a beef standpoint, you know, that's a lot of hamburger meat, not necessarily steaks. So again, we're watching what's going on. It's a moving target. The entire agricultural system is trying to monitor what's going on and adjust as quickly as possible.
And real quick, as far as the growing season up there, aside from COVID, how's everything going this year? I know that last season is one that a lot of North Dakota farmers just want to forget.
Yeah, 2019 was a really rough one for us. 2020 is really, you could kind of the tale of two cities. You could almost divide the state right down the middle, and we've got opposite things going on in the state. So if you go east versus west, in the western part of the state, we came into the spring's work a bit dry. Planting was pretty much on time in the western portion of the state. But as we've moved through the growing season now, that's been a very, very dry area. If you look at the Drought Monitor Index, western North Dakota is now in a D1. There's places that are looking at a D2 that are starting to appear. Now this last week, fortunately, we did have some rain showers come through that helped recharge some of the surface moisture, which again will revitalize some of the primarily spring wheat, but also some of the corn and soybeans in the western regions. In the east was the exact opposite. We had a very wet fall. We had a lot of trouble getting the corn crop off. There was a lot of harvesting going on for the corn crop this spring. We're going to have some additional prevent plant acres, primarily in the east, again impacting our corn and soybean plantings primarily. There were some wheat, prevent plant wheat that showed up, but not as much as there was for prevent plant corn and soybeans. So eastern portion of the state has been very, very wet. We got in spring's work a little bit later than we'd like. The crop is hanging in there. The heat that we've had the last week or so has really helped kind of perk the corn and beans up. But we need to have these continued warm weather throughout the rest of the growing season to make sure we don't run into the challenges we saw last year.
Sure. And okay, advice on what we should be doing right now when it comes to sales of corn and soybeans. The market isn't falling apart like it was in April and May. Are you making any sales of that old crop for both of those?
Yeah, and I'd like to try and separate again old crop from new crop. Let's start with soybeans. For old crop soybeans, I do think these are some really good pricing opportunities. For the guys that are holding some soybeans and looking to try and get rid of them, I think that now would be a really good opportunity to do that. We've had a nice rebound on the soybean side. I think this is some really good opportunities for old crop. For new crop soybeans, to start making some sales at these levels are not a bad idea. Again, when we look forward in time, we do have some downside risk in the soybean sector. There's some uncertainty about what the Chinese demand is going to be as we move into the fall and winter months. So we have to be a little bit careful about some downside risk in soybeans. For corn, I do think there's some opportunities for getting rid of some old crop corn. For new crop corn, I'd be a little bit cautious yet. I think I'd wait to see how this warm weather and what the pollination is going to look like for the crop as we move into the August time frame. But again, I wouldn't hesitate if we get kind of a rally going on, if there is get to be some spark in the market, boy, take advantage of that, because right now the yield opportunities or the yield projections for the corn crop still look pretty good. Even though it's starting to build some heat and worries about a high pressure system building in the corn belt, there's relatively good soil moisture in most of the growing regions. I think the yield potential is still there.
And we got to get an update on wheat from you as well. Acres lower than in past years, but how are we looking in terms of yield and quality for that crop?
Yeah, again, the winter wheat harvest is going on right now. There's a lot of variability in yields, depending upon where you are. If you had some frost damage, or again, there were some dry areas showing up in the central part of the winter wheat growing, hard red winter wheat growing regions. But the quality looks very good. From what I'm understanding, the test weights are coming in very strong. Protein levels are a little bit lower than average, but not horrible. Again, a lot of variability. When we look at the winter wheat growing region in Montana, that's going to have a pretty good crop. As we move to the spring wheat growing region, again, we're going to see some variability. The western regions in North Dakota, where we tend to see a lot of wheat acres planted, and as it drifts then north into Saskatchewan, they had a drier spring. We're under some stress right now. The recent rains will certainly help. So I think the yield potential may be capped a bit because of the early development, but again, the rains we got recently should help the heads fill. I don't think we've had a lot of yield drag as of today. Again, we'll wait to see as once the combines start running, but I don't expect a major quality problems for the spring wheat crop either. So again, we may have taken the top end off the spring wheat yield potential, but I do think the quality will hold up.